see that these directives were actually translated into action. Now, what is it that one was disappointed about the National Food Security Bill? Firstly, in the bill, it was so good when they mentioned that every pregnant woman and lactating mother was entitled to meal free of charge during pregnancy and 6 months after childbirth through the local Anganwadi center, which is what all of us had wanted, and it was actually mentioned in it. But now this has been withdrawn in the standing committee. They said it was replaced instead by a 5 kilo of food grain per month during pregnancy till 2 years of a childbirth. The mention of Anganwadi is not there. So if we are going to provide food for children, we need to know through what institution that food is going to be given and what that center would look like. Like if you are talking about right to education, then we will have to talk about schools. Then we'll have to talk about what the standard of the school will be. Will there be 2 teachers? Will there be subject-wise teachers? Will there be a room? What is it? How would they provide? But here it seems they have ignored the presence of Anganwadi centers, the presence of ICDS program entirely, all the gains that were made and all the hopes and aspirations that the poor had for strengthening of Anganwadi centers just do not find place in the revised standing committee draft. And they were just not there. And it is expected that a 2-year-old child will have a share in the 5 kilo food grains. We all know that below 2 years, a child requires take-home rations, and the same food that an adult eats, a child will not eat. So in a way, this bypassing of Anganwadi center, bypassing of ICDS program is something that has caused a lot of anguish to many of us who are dealing with food provisioning for children. It also talks about, very interestingly, that it shall be admissible up to second child in order to encourage stabilization of population. So if a mother has a third child, then she will not get her entitlement to the 1,000 rupees that she will be given. And we all know that stabilization of population cannot happen through incentives or disincentives. It is so much related to development. It is so much related to education. With economists here, I don't see why I should even say why population and how population can be stabilized. But here we think by denying children, the third or the fourth or the fifth child, her access to food, entitlement, one is going to foster population stabilization. I think it is simply crass, and that should just not be there. And in fact, it has to be a provisioning for compulsory breastfeeding, for the children's food entitlements till they are 6 months old, and look at the power battle that a child who is below 6 has to fight to get what is so natural for the child as a mother's breast milk. I think we will have to really pay attention to this, and we will have to, I think it requires the energy of each one of us to see that a child below 6 months is not deprived or denied the right to compulsory breastfeeding. It requires creches, and there's no mention of creche at all. It also guarantees children the right from 2-year-old to 16-year-old. In school, I do not know which 2-year-old is in school, which 3-year-old is in school, which 4-year-old in school, which 5-year-old is in school. Again, a kind of an amnesia, an absence of recognizing that there is something called an ICDS program in this country. We have battled so much for children's entitlement from 0 to 6, 6 to 3, 3 to 6, what kind of food, what kind of quality care, what kind of nutritional standards. Nothing of this is there, no reference to this. And so in a way, I think the argument that I'm trying to make is that this bill does not have a role for ICDS program at all. It does not have a role for Anganwadi Center. It does not look at all the gains that have been made through the Supreme Court, through its directives for a whole range of population. And I think by not acknowledging the ICDS as a prime vehicle for nutritional services for children, for fighting malnutrition, it negates all the gains that have been made. and we will have to not ignore ICDS and put it as a part of the National Food Security Bill. At the same time, I think we will have to include a whole set of children who cannot be left behind. There are children with the physical disabilities, children with chronic illness, HIV and AIDS, children who are subject to communal violence, riots, children who are subject to natural disasters, and we know they are the worst hit whenever there is a displacement or destabilization, and one must have a strong provision of entitlements to food, quality food for children who are in these kinds of circumstances. We need a legal framework. I think it is so important to reiterate that that a law is important for children. Often there is this argument that we are not ready for it. But we know that in our context, a legal framework is an expression of the state's commitment to its precious citizens and our children, as well as of setting norms of society. It is only when the system begins to perceive violence and inequity in access to health, nutrition, food, education, and protection, and is compelled to bring about substantial change in favor of children's rights that democracy is nurtured. In fact, we find that the entitlement to NREGA is what gave Shama the courage to fight for the job cards, the courage to fight for every instance of corruption and see that it is mitigated. There cannot be a mitigation of corruption without an anti-poverty program and without a law that can support every entitlement. It's not done in a vacuum. You remove corruption issues by entitlements and seeing that people are empowered to ask for their entitlements, and a law gives that. So a legal framework filled with concern for child and believes that a child can live only because adults and the world of the adult politics will so. Such a wholehearted policy means a universal coverage with quality food and nutritional entitlements, making investments in children without calculating the cost, and sound institutional care and protection for all children. We have seen again on the ground when the community is prepared, when they are managing children's nutrition, children's food, the vast and remarkable changes it makes, not just in the family, but in the society as a whole. We see that every right that is attained sets new norms, new cultures, new traditions, new experiences, new ways of doing and thinking things, that we are all equal. It increases and radicalizes democracy. It creates new opportunities. It changes the society's socio-economic formation. It builds in greater participation and confidence of citizens in themselves and in the country. Every right attained builds states' capacities for democratization of all public institutions. When state institutions no longer are sites for power, but the contestation of power. I think we need this right for the child, for quality food, because that is the only way I feel that you radicalize democracy. We need an ethical faith, leap of faith, and an arousing of national conscience, where we take pride in what we have attained for our children, and where the village takes pride and becomes a proud village because every child is alive, is not malnourished, and because they have the best Anganwadi center in the country. Thank you.
So I can only agree with Professor Shantha Sinha. And actually, those of you who were here early already had a chance to see those little clips from Anganwadis across the country. You know, these programs, both the public distribution system, midday meal scheme, ICDS, at least in the media, I think they're largely discredited schemes. and somehow it seems that the media is missing the half full part of the glass and focusing only on the half empty. And of course, that is a very important function that the media is supposed to play, is to draw attention to all the problems in the implementation. But to present a more balanced picture is also quite important. And in fact, this is a problem not only limited to the media. I think even in academia, I think somehow sometimes I think we tend to ask the wrong questions. And being part of academia, I suppose I can take that liberty. So what I'm going to do is just briefly tell you a little bit about the National Food Security Act, and then ask Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia to speak and give us his comments on that. So like I said, it takes a sort of life cycle approach, in the sense it goes from the womb to the grave. It has something for pregnant and lactating women, or at least the initial draft date, and a lot of it somehow is vanishing as it makes its way back to Parliament. The midday meal scheme is for children in the school-going age group. The public distribution system is for adults. And one early draft of the bill actually even had cash transfers in the form of old age pensions, for the last leg of your life, which has been struck off from the Act. As far as the PDS is concerned, the Act is now going to cover 75% of the rural population, and it's going to cover 50% of the urban population. Those who are under the Act will get 5 kg per capita. This is also actually a debated issue, whether it should be per capita or per household. The advantage of per capita is that if you have a larger family, then you get appropriate amount of grain. But there are some caveats to that. So, for instance, if a new person is born, how easy is it going to be to add that person's name onto the ration card? And given the sort of circumstances that Shama described where they're working, is it really likely that a new child's name will be added on? It also creates confusion, because in the village, some people will say, why is she getting 30 and why am I getting only 20? And this gives a little bit of power to the dealer to say, to do some hanky-panky as well. Anyway, this is a debated issue, and it would be nice if you could comment on it when you speak. One of the other things that was covered after yesterday's meeting of the food ministers of the state with Professor K.V. Thomas, who's the central food minister, is that now that we know 75% of the population is going to be covered in rural areas, how should we divide this, allocate this across the states? Should it be 75% in Punjab and in Orissa, or should it be maybe universal in Orissa and a little bit less in Punjab, because Punjab is known to be a more prosperous state? Maybe I should have said, picked another one. Anyway, so with that, I'll ask you to make your comments. Kerala should get a little bit less. As much as you want, they're all dying to hear you. There are hundreds of people outside.
Thank you very much. Well, look, I know that I've lectured here before, and normally there are about 1/5 the people, and it doesn't take much of empirical analysis to conclude that Amartya must be the main reason why all of you are coming. So, there you are. Now, therefore, the intelligent thing for me to do is to say my bit, but to recognize that the 1/5 of the people who normally listen to me, I don't know which ones they are, and anyway, they've heard me many times, so I should just pose some issues, and maybe say a few things which anchor what you might call government perceptions, and actually let Amartya I actually came here to listen to Amartya also, by the way, so I think it would be very sensible to divide time that way. It gives him some time to absorb both the atmosphere and maybe focus a little bit on some of the questions. Now, I think we've had a very good presentation by the chairperson of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. I think she's gone over a very broad range of issues, all of which are relevant. I want to say that there are some things which, as facts, are not actually in dispute, although sometimes some details need to be spelled out. She pointed out, for example, that there's far too much malnourishment. I think that's absolutely correct. She also said that 46% are malnourished. That is indeed the latest data, but the latest data is for 2005, 2006. So one of the issues, I'm making a very minor point here, one of the issues is that it was in recognition of this appallingly high malnutrition rate, and all the international data will tell you that whereas we're better than many other countries in many dimensions, we're probably really, really bad on child malnutrition. Not probably, definitely are. And that is all based on the data of 2005, 2006. It's shameful, but there isn't a subsequent survey. The National Family Health Survey, which actually produces this data, they haven't tabulated results for any more recent survey. I think they're doing one, and even that was a little uncertain. So we are talking about something several years old. And we're talking about a period when government policy and public debate was hugely sensitized to this issue. I mean, if you were to ask the government, do you agree with this and what have you done? They would say, oh, well, you know, in the 11th plan, we recognized this and we had a whole lot of schemes. Now, the unfortunate, I mean, I don't want to be foolish enough to say, because we have these schemes, it must have disappeared. And we know that the schemes are not that effective. But the fact is, we are not in a position today to say how effective have these schemes been. That's a problem, it's a bad problem, and I have no doubt, by the way, that the malnutrition is still very high. So I'm not saying that 45% would have gone down to 20. I should point out, by the way, globally, it's very difficult to get it below 20. So 0 is not really the reference point you're looking for a low-income country. But how much of the distance between 45 and 20 we've covered, we just don't know. My own guess is that we've covered more than many people think, but that probably, I would not be surprised at all if you still had malnutrition of the range of 33, 34, even 35%. So 1/3 of the children, there's no doubt about it, are suffering from malnutrition. I think the difference between earlier data was that the rate of decline was very, very slow. So if you look at 93, 94, 97, whatever, I mean, I don't remember the exact years, but if you look at the previous 3 National Family Health Surveys, unlike the data on poverty, which actually show a sharp decline, the data on malnutrition do not show a sharp decline. So the real question is, did the way we designed these schemes in the 11th plan and the extra money that we put into it, did it really have an impact? Now, it seems to me, you know, that before we get very excited about pushing things, the first thing is to have some idea of whether what we've been doing is effective. Otherwise, you are in serious danger of falling into the trap, which I think was well exemplified by one of my bosses in the civil service, Mr. Gopi Arora, no longer with us now, who used to have on his table a little plaque which said, "This is a crisis. We must do something. This is something, therefore let us do it." I think it's a big mistake to jump to that conclusion. So we should seriously look, what is it that is going to most effectively address the problem, which nobody denies is a problem. Now, I think it's also true, and I agree with the chairperson, that this is not just a fact. You know, facts are things that come out in the plan and EPW and various lectures in the IIT. But this is an issue now of broader concern. I think people are worried about it, concerned about it, and I think there's therefore a certain moral recognition that we owe it to this bottom 1/3 of our children, that what's going on is completely wrong. That is new in the sense that I think 10 years ago, this concern wasn't there. Okay, so there is concern. The Prime Minister himself has said, and only 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, that malnutrition is a national shame. So I don't think there can be any doubt that this is a problem and we need to address it. NGOs are very concerned. Socially active civil society organizations increasingly play an extremely important role insensitizing the government. I mean, they of course generally criticize the government. That's good. I mean, governments don't get sensitized, by the way, if you don't criticize them. We simply write nice letters saying, by the way, have you thought about this? You won't have that much impact. So I do compliment the civil society. They don't pick on hundreds of things. We don't have a civil society saying, why are exports low? But they're looking at a few things, and I do think the malnutrition and the broader health-related issues have come to the front of the government's attention. And I think government will be forced to do something, but also forced to do sensible evaluation. And this is a big problem, because I think with many of the schemes that we have, and you can see that from the criticisms of the Supreme Court on many issues, because they're concerned about it. Then the government says there are these schemes, then they say these schemes are completely ineffective and riddled with corruption, and they don't have any impact, and therefore the whole concern is, well, how can we make them better? And I think that's a relevant issue. I have no doubt, by the way, that we need to spend more money in the direct provision of assistance, support, whatever it is, through government programs. There should be no doubt in anybody's mind about that. However, merely universalizing what we have is not necessarily going to solve anything. I mean, in the 11th plan, we talk about the danger of the U without Q, universalization without quality. Now, in that sense, I mean, the ICDS is perhaps the oldest development program in the government. ICDS has been around since 1975. Now, if you were to judge what has been happening, obviously it's not having the impact you want. You need to analyze why that is so. Could be that it's underfunded, could be that it's undermanned, could be that it's not really addressing the critical areas that matter. So let me pose a few questions, and I'll say a few things about food security later. I mean, if you look at malnutrition, and I'm no expert on this, but because I attend many seminars and listen to many presentations on this by different groups, I'm giving you what I absorbed from these. And if this is not, if this reflects a poor understanding of the issues, I apologize in advance. First of all, there's a lot of evidence that says that low birth weight is probably the single most important predictor of malnutrition. And then it's kind of logical to say, well, look, if our babies are being born low birth weight, we should be doing something about it. It also, by the way, implies that if you don't do something about it, there's no use running ICDS programs which kick in at the age of 3. So you need, if you're serious about malnutrition, you need to analyze the problem correctly. And the analysis of the problem, the first point is there are too many low birth weight babies in India. That is happening in turn because too many girls are getting married early and having babies well before their bodies are actually ready to produce healthy babies. Why are they getting married early? Social prejudice. Nobody wants to keep a girl past puberty in the house. They prefer to get her married off. She's somebody else's responsibility. And this is not going to be solved by the food provision end. This requires a much more fundamental change in how that side of our social system works. It's also true that the health of the mother would affect whether the baby is low birth weight, and that relates to general economic development, general income levels. Does she have a family which ensures enough nutrition and this and that and the other? So that's one set of areas that we need to intervene on. Then I think the chairperson mentioned breastfeeding. Extremely important from what I know, that the protocols that have been established suggest that there should be exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months. And furthermore, that the child should go to the breast within 2 hours of being born. Now, chairperson said something I was a little puzzled. You said compulsory breastfeeding. I'm not sure what you meant by compulsory, but what you meant is somehow it should happen. Obviously, it cannot be done by statute. So we do need, no, I wasn't deriding, I'm just trying to clarify that I agree with her, by the way, that next to low birth weight, this is where we need to anchor our efforts. Now, here again, I mean, large parts of the country believe that the milk is a bit dirty in the first day or so. So whereas the medical opinion says give the breast to the child within an hour or two of being born, all the grandmothers or the mothers-in-law are saying, no, 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 your milk isn't really healthy enough. So all the period when colostrum is being produced by the mother, which would actually increase the immunity of the child, is completely lost. This doesn't require money, but it does require IEC, information, education, communication. We have a whole, I mean, this is not going to be done by the Anganwadi Center. This has to be done by the health service. So I think we need a major revolution in how we communicate what are sensible child rearing practices. It is unfortunate that in our social culture, most of our women are trained to believe that their mothers-in-law are the dominant source of knowledge, but regrettably on this matter, they are all grotesquely wrong. Now, it doesn't matter very much if the family is rich, because you know there's less infection, kids are more insulated, but for a poor family, it's very important. And secondly, exclusive breastfeeding does not mean a lot of breastfeeding, but also it's hot, so give the child a little bit of water, or somebody comes along and gives them a little bit of honey. Exclusive means really exclusive. Nothing else, not even water. Frankly, I didn't actually believe this, but I asked someone, and they said, no, that's exactly what we mean. Now, the interesting thing is, that's not what we do with our kids. And the reason we get away with it is that our environments are more hygienic. So, I mean, they're getting formula, they're getting all sorts of other things, and poor people are being forced or led through objectionable advertising to emulate their social superiors and ending up doing the same thing. And in an environment where water is not clean and sanitation is very bad, and this is the other thing, by the way, in India, malnutrition, we're way off, and on sanitation, we're really way off. I mean, really, really way off. So if you really want to do something about malnutrition, action in these areas, and this is the hypothesis that I'm putting forward. I don't know the answer, I'm not the expert. It may well be that it is in these areas that you need to concentrate your effort, and not what you think. So we need to ask that question. Immunization. That's a third area where India is really bad. I mean, 67% or something like that. And I think Amartya at Miranda House yesterday or day before pointed out that in Bangladesh it's above 90%. It's above 90% in some parts of India, but the central part of India, UP, Bihar, I mean, the immunization rates are below 50%. Now, if you're going to not immunize the children, they're going to be suffering from all kinds of diseases. It's going to be very difficult to make sure that they are properly they have proper nutrition, because whatever nutrition you give them in terms of food simply leaks out in terms of consequences of ill health, diarrhea, this, that, and the other. I've already talked about drinking water and sanitation. Clearly, the income of the family, I mean, once beyond the point, I mean, the income of the family has a very dominant effect on how much nutrition outcome there's going to be. And that's obviously something that's what inclusive growth is about. That's what the whole idea of trying to make sure that you get a growth process where people's incomes rise at all levels, and especially in rural areas. Not a growth process which is simply beneficial to the graduates of IIT and the less well-endowed but actually equally good institution. Much, much deeper spread. That's important. Of course, it's also, there's also the role of ensuring a supply of food. And there, I mean, the government we've long had a PDS, basic idea being that for certain categories of the population, assurance of a certain amount of food grain at highly subsidized prices is a good thing. There's no dispute about that. There's some reference made in the discussion to the food security bill. We don't handle it. And what has happened is the food security bill was put forward. The standing committee has come back with its recommendations. The Ministry of Food and Civil Supplies will now look at those recommendations and seek the approval of the government on what needs to be done. Now, there's a lot of discussion on the Food Security Bill, and a lot of that is detailed. The central point that the government is committed to a PDS system which will provide access to food grains at subsidized prices, not to 100% of the population, but if the Standing Committee recommendations are accepted, it would be something like 67% of the population as a whole. This is not in doubt. The issue really is, how well is it going to be implemented? That's always a problem. And I think we have to wait and see. I mean, one of the things I want to emphasize here, and people ought to know that the institution of a system of subsidized food supply involves very specific responsibilities on the part of the central government and the state government. The role of the central government is to have reached an agreement on what's the amount of coverage per state, and to deliver to the state the amount of food needed, and in some manner also deliver the subsidy. Either you give the food cheap, or if you're going to sell the food at a sort of a market-related price, then to deliver the subsidy to the individuals so that they can buy it from the shop, one way or the other. Everything else is the responsibility of state governments, because actually the government of India, once it's delivered so many tons to a state government agency, has really, it is deeply concerned, but it has nothing to do with what happens afterwards. So we're really running a system in which we should be very clear, what do you want the central government to do? And then the rest is all the responsibility of state governments. And I think one of the important things to note is that, states vary hugely in the efficiency with which they run the PDS system. Actually, it works extremely well in some states, and it works extremely badly in other states. And I think we ought to be very clear, do people think that there's something the central government can do to make bad performing PDS systems better performing in states where they're not performing? The current division of responsibilities rules out anything other than evaluation, a sort of a naming and shaming, although frankly, even that is not very easy to do, because after all, these issues can become politicized. So I think people should give a lot of thought to, since the existence and the continuation of the PDS system is not in doubt, and it's a very high priority of the government, and we are going to end up spending a lot of money on it. The food subsidy at present is something of the order of maybe 75,000 crores a year, which is borne by the government of India. If the Food Security Bill, I'm sure it will be passed, we will add maybe 25,000 or maybe 30,000 crores to this. There is a section of commentators, particularly the business press, I don't know if any of them are here, but I'm not trying to be rude, but there is a section that will immediately invoke the fiscal deficit issue. I think this is nonsense, because it is expensive. I have no idea whether we're getting value for money, but I think the country can afford that much, because in the 12th plan we said that the present level of subsidies in the system is 2.4% of GDP, whereas it ought to be reduced to 1.4%. And if it is reduced to 1.4%, there'll be enough money to do the food subsidy, the midday meals, and all of that. What there won't be is to subsidize petroleum products and to subsidize fertilizer